Hey everyone, welcome back. We're in lesson 7 of The Way of the Heart. Inviting everyone to make their home in their breathing, to the words I like to use, bring, I've heard this every recording, so you're probably used to it, probably sick of me saying it by now. But it is a beautiful practice. Bringing 100% of your attention, because what you put your attention on, as Joshua says, is what creates your experience. In this case, we're going to put our attention on the breath, which is breathing us and giving us life. And in doing so, becoming the observer, switching into observer mind. And from that place, we can observe sensations in the body, we can observe thoughts, we can observe emotional states, anger, joy, sadness, fear. And we can become the director of our lives instead of the puppet. The puppeteer of our puppet instead of just the puppet. So, it's a muscle that grows. There's actually research that shows that the more times you choose anger, the weaker the brain gets. And the more times you choose a meditative, calm state, and it is a choice, the stronger the brain gets. Stronger the mind, the groove of the mind, which will, in stressful situations, go right into observer, which gives you a better chance of succeeding in those situations. So with that, by way of introduction, just inviting everyone to take a nice deep breath, bringing 100% of your attention to the breath. The inhale and the exhale. Let's just take a minute and feel the weight of the body in the chair if you're sitting, or on the feet if you're standing, on the whole body if you're lying down, wherever the weight is that's being distributed. And go ahead and check around the body, the shoulders, neck, eyes, space behind the eyes, used to say. The head, the interior space of the head, ears, nose, feet, toes, hands, arms, torso, spine, rear end, thighs, calves. Imagine all the bones in the body. And then this miracle of breath, which is coming in and bringing fuel, oxygen into the body, running the body. We might have 3 meals a day or whatever, but we're being fed oxygen every breath. So with that, just settling down to be present for the teachings in a state of true presence and listening. We're going to start with a paragraph that starts with, "What then could ever possibly arise to obstruct the truth that is true always?" So go ahead and just find that. It's right a little bit before where we finished up last time. And we'll start there, starting with the text. "What then could ever possibly arise to obstruct the truth that is true always? There is an ancient forest somewhere on your planet, a forest high in a rugged mountain valley, so rugged that no one has ever been there. Unknown to the minds of humanity, life goes on in the forest. Deep within the heart of this forest, this morning, a little tiny blade of grass seemed to be tossed by an unseen wind. And as it was tossed for just a fragment of a moment, so subtle and soft was this wind, that as the sunlight played against this blade of grass, it cast the smallest of conceivable shadows on a stone that lay just a little bit away from the blade of grass. No one noticed. The shadow had no effect. The rock didn't even notice. No one on the planet noticed. No one in any of the heavens noticed except me. I needed to build something to build a story around. That tiny shadow cast by a little blade of grass momentarily wiggled in a wind in some remote forest has virtually no effect on the turning of the planets, the creation of new suns, and certainly not one trace of effect on how deeply your Father loves you. That little shadow is what you have given power to. I pause for a second. That's quite a description, isn't it? That this the most minuscule of events in creation, practically, and it's what we've given power to. So he talks earlier in the text about listening to the wrong voice. So we trained ourselves to give power to something insignificant and tiny and pretending it's huge. Back to the text, and it seems to be able to obstruct the truth within you from being lived. For the moment you gave that little tiny shadow power, in that very moment, fear was born. And fear is always a contraction away from love. And fear makes you smaller than the blade of grass that momentarily seems to cast a shadow and therefore obstructs your recognition of the warmth of the sun that bathes you always. And a paragraph. I want to emphasize again, it's a little bit like the tiny mad idea creeping in discussed in the Course. The creation of the dream of separation, the act of giving power to this thing, can only emerge out of truth, out of reality. And it's essential, I think, not to slip into a dualistic definition of things when we look at this teaching. He's not saying it's very tiny, but there is this shadow in creation. He's not saying it as if there's something that actually has power to oppose God, or that something other than love is real, even if it's very tiny. He's not saying that. He's saying that only love is real, and any belief that it isn't is utterly insignificant in the end, as tiny in creation as that shadow. But even the idea it's a shadow, it implies that something could go wrong, or something has gone wrong, or that there's an error, as in, it's a little bit hard to describe, but if you imagine two situations. One, you're having a dream at night. Let's say you're having a dream at night and you have a nightmare and the world is destroyed in the nightmare and it's horrible and you wake up in a cold sweat. That's different from the world being destroyed in, quote, reality, in your waking state. What he's describing here is not a shadow that exists in reality, not in the way we're thinking of it. It's a physical event, but it's not a shadow as in something other than love. It's really important to see this, because if you start describing reality, God's reality, the infinity, as having a mark, a duality, a darkness to the lightness, that the duality is somehow real, that is saying, they're saying something other than love is real along with love. So the statement, only love is real, which is the foundational statement of these teachings, then is wiped out. So that can't be what he's saying here. It's not what he's saying. He's saying somehow we've managed, through our extraordinary creativity, to take something incredibly tiny and make it seem incredibly important. And that's how distorted the dream is. That's the nightmare. So we're like at night having this dream that something can obstruct God's love. But when we wake up, we see, that was just impossible. And we're using the power of the mind to create that dream. But in reality, even love is even powering that choice. So in the end, as he said to me once in a session, only the loving story is true. The most loving story of any event, the one which reflects the Father's will that you be perfectly happy, is true. And there can't, in infinity, you cannot plug in even a tiny bit of real darkness, as it were, real evil, real something other than love. Even if it's tiny, 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 it doesn't matter, because in infinity, there's no such thing as tiny, tiny, tiny. It's all infinite. The way that the dream is created is described in the Garden of Eden. Adam and Eve put their attention, they eat of, they put their attention on, they consume, focus their attention on the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And that's how they lose heaven. What they do is that's how they start the dream. So they didn't lose heaven, they lost awareness of heaven. They lost the experience of heaven in their own awareness. They went from heaven is spread across the face of the earth and mankind sees it, to heaven is spread across the earth and mankind sees it not. But that was because of a perceptual situation they were experiencing, not because there was any flaw in reality. And even their opportunity to choose to dream, very important. We're not saying to genuinely oppose God. Someone sitting there and dreaming that they're having a big battle with God in the middle of the room, and it is not affecting the world in which they're sitting. That's what's happening. We're having a dream of conflict with God. God's not affected by this in any way, in any negative way. So it's important to understand, whenever a metaphor is used like this, not to project ideas of duality, of good and evil, of light and dark, ultimately, of love and something other than love that we may have in ourselves. We mustn't project that onto these stories, because only love is real. And that's the central teaching. Only love is real. Continuing from the text. And when you resist healing, when you struggle to do what, as we have been observing you here do, learning to, quote, speak your truth, when you resist healing in these ways, you must rest assured that something has occurred just prior to that. And it is your decision, or important, it's your decision, to believe that the shadow is all-powerful, and that if you heal, if you grow, if you change, if you let Christ live in you, that little blade of grass and the tiny little shadow it creates for a very temporary moment will come and punish you and crush you. And if you can truly take this story into your being and recognize the utter laughability of such a belief, you will never again fear fear. You will never again allow fear to master you and direct the course of your life. You will indeed learn what it means to trust what is birthed in the heart. And you will arise and you will go forth without fear, with no story at all. And you will accomplish whatever creativity wishes to express through you. And the whole while you'll know that of yourself you do nothing, but the Father through you can do anything. Therefore, indeed, what forms of the shadow of that blade of grass are you allowing to run and own and possess your soul? An interesting question. End of paragraph. If you can see the utter laughability of the belief that there is something outside of you which has power to affect your experience, because that's what he's saying. He's saying that you're saying that the child of God who has been given dominion and freedom within all realms of creativity, all realms of creation, the Son of God is sovereign. What our belief is this tiny little shadow on this tiny little rock in a hidden remote forest that nobody knows about has the power to thwart, dominate, and punish the child of God. And that is utterly laughable, because the child of God is utterly and completely free. A statement, again, through a session that I had with Jeshua being asked to share now, is that I got to the point where after 8 or 9 years of sessions, I kind of thought, well, I kind of he kept saying, we want you to get to the point of moving past us, like not needing us as much. And he was building this sort of theology within me as I had these sessions over about 9 years through the channel of the Way of Mastery, JM. And gradually, Jeshua was leading me to this comprehensive theology, which was kind of quieting my mind finally. My mind wouldn't keep going, yeah, but what about this? Yeah, but what about this? Yeah, but what about this? So I had one really final question for him, and I thought, well, this is important enough to me so that if he doesn't agree with this, I'm going to have to move to something else. I have to find a different teacher, just for me. And so I went in and I said, so Jeshua, the way I kind of see it is that the old teachings, which we call the Bible, the Old Testament, the New Testament, the old teachings teach us that only God's will is done. He said, yes. And then I said, the new teachings, Course in Miracles, Way of Mastery at that time, there have been some other things since, teach us that we are not separate from that one. Jeshua goes, yes. And so I say, so the truth is that, when we're aware of it, obviously at a level that we're not always aware of, right? I mean, we're not aware of this, the conscious mind, but the point is to bring the conscious mind to awareness of this fact. So I say to him, so if the old teachings teach us that only God's will is ever done, and the new teachings teach us that we're not separate from God, then does that mean that in truth only our will is ever done? Jeshua goes, yes. So this is the teaching that I kind of think of as the final teaching. Now, I learned it many years ago, and I still struggle and do my thing and all that, but there's something about it that has been extremely powerful. It's the primary spiritual practice I engage in on a daily basis. It's like, oh, what? Like, this doesn't seem like it's what I want, but it must be. According to Jeshua in these teachings, there is no separation. There are not separate wills. There aren't these all individuated beings making autonomous choices. That's an important one. We are one being moving in harmonious expression. So it's not that we don't have free will, it's that we all agree when we see what's really going on. We've chosen to be unaware of what's going on, so it seems like there's conflict. But in truth, nothing can occur that isn't our will. We're obviously not talking about the ego identification of self, but the truth of who we are, the truth. And a lot of the work becomes, oh, let me see if I can get in touch with the truth of who and what I am. And one of the ways to look to see what it is you want is you just look around you and you go, oh, I guess this is what I want because only my will is ever done. Like exactly what's happening, the AI revolution and the global warming and everything else that's happening, wars and rumors of wars and so on and so on. That's so a deep meditation wonder question might be, that's so interesting. This sure doesn't seem like it's what I want. How is this what I desire? Because if it wasn't what I desire, it wouldn't be here. And that means everything. So, thanks for listening to that. That may be all that needs to be shared from my point, because it's sort of the final lesson from my mind. But, of course, the central teaching is the first axiom, that's another way of saying the first axiom. And Jeshua shares somewhere that the whole teachings, all the formal teachings, all the teachings are really designed to help us learn the first axiom. I and I alone am the creator of all that I experience. Not the creator of my reality, the creator of my experience of reality. So I said we'd do lesson 7, not just me talking the whole time, but that was a really important one I just wanted to share there. So, therefore, indeed, what forms of the shadow of that blade of grass are you allowing to run and own and possess your soul? An interesting question. There are many forms of that shadow, aren't there? There are peers and parents and siblings to please. And there are governments to bow down before. There are mates and children that must come first. There are bills to pay. There are desires to check and keep in order. There are activities and statements and behaviors done by others that require at least 7 or 8 hours a day for you to analyze and judge them to death. My, this world is exhausting. But somebody has to do it. And you thought it was love that makes the world go round. Trust me, love does not spin and get nowhere. Love created you. Love birthed within you as an individual, at least within the dance of time and space, the power to choose, the power to feel, the power to know, the power to channel light and love, the power to know that something exists within you as you. That's what love has done. And has fear ever created anything remotely like that? So what do you want? Creation or mimicry? Peace? Or the ability to simply drug yourself with triviality? All power under heaven and earth flowing through you with every breath, so that your consciousness witnesses not only what you do as the maker or doer, but that which the divine is doing through you in each moment, so that you get to marvel at the creativity of love, the very same love that moves the sun and the moon and the other stars. Now that's a delightful pastime. I want to read that paragraph again. So what do you want? Creation or mimicry? Peace or the ability to simply drug yourself with triviality? All power under heaven and earth flowing through you with every breath, so that your consciousness witnesses not what you do as the maker or doer, but that which the divine is doing through you in each moment, so that you get to marvel at the creativity of love, the very same love that moves the sun and moon and other stars. Now that's a delightful pastime. And when your life, this one life, and you only have one life, you might have many bodies, but you will have one life. When you give that one life wholly, what is this called here, with the lock, the stock, and the barrel, when you give it all to being only that presence of love, and if there are any cobwebs in the way of that, let's get on with it and get them swept out of the way. I've got better things to do because the whole of creation is waiting to move through me, and I want to be aware of it. I want my experience, my lived consciousness, to be blissfully absorbed in observing the flow of love through this mystery. You call the body and dare to call your body as if you have some right to possess it. Give the body to God. God knows how to use it, you don't. When you are in that place, heaven and earth will move to become your servant. Not until. Send a conflicted message, nobody shows up for the dance. And when you move into that place for no other reason than that you want it, you will know, because you will be the truth that sets all things free. So now you know what the shadow is. Perhaps sometimes you enjoy dancing with it. The greatest question is, are you going to let the shadow lead, or are you going to lead? When your life becomes that, I'm not speaking of perfection as you would consider it, when your life becomes that motivation, that attitude, that declaration, and that devotion, then perfection will be witnessed through you. For perfection is miracle-mindedness, in which that which saves time occurs. And when your life becomes that, when you no longer have any conflicted, what is the word, commitment? When you no longer have any conflicted commitment in your beingness, you will know exactly what the result of my life was for me, because you will be that. Let's end there for now. A lot going on here, really talking about giving up the commitment to seeing how small and miserable we can be by believing that we're victims, believing a worldview in which a really lousy reality that we then live within. We're victims. There are all these forces working against us. Stuff is happening we don't want. Things should be different. Living in judgment. It's a very different place from really dedicating the mind and soul and body and being to contemplating the very question I shared earlier, like, how must this be what I want? even if it's just to learn, oh, this is the consequence of doing that. I'm realizing this isn't what I want, but I want the lesson in order to help me get there. A lot of what we're doing is helping us understand, oh, well, when I choose conflicted commitments, when I choose anger, hatred, the consequences are very unpleasant. When I choose to be the presence of anger and judgment, the world responds to me in such a way as to say, hey, are you sure you want to do that? Here's a 2x4 across the head, just to make you rethink it, because you asked for it, because you don't want to go down the path of hatred and judgment and think, oh, this is the way to live. So just see whatever's arising in your life as a gift and something that's helping you distill and get closer to the truth, like the sand in the oyster, yeah? And that above all else, it is indeed what you are requesting and asking for, at least according to these teachings. We're students of these teachings, trying them out to see how we feel, what do we think about them. This isn't a you must do this kind of thing. This is David Chalk in Rhode Island. Thank you again. I look forward to speaking with you again.